This is Hashtag Finance, presented to you by the Canadian Securities Exchange, the exchange for entrepreneurs. With your host, Barrington Miller.
Hi, welcome to an edition of Mining Monday. I'm your host, Barrington Miller with the Canadian Securities Exchange, and today I'm here with Guy Goulet from Cerro de Pasco. Bonjour, monsieur. How are you?
Very good. And yourself? Thank you for inviting me.
Oh, I'm doing well, thanks. And, we just want to start off and say I hope you and your family and all your colleagues and coworkers and stuff like that are safe and sound during COVID. How are you doing with that?
Yeah, well, thank God nobody close to me were affected. I've got 4 children. They're all back to work now. So here in Quebec, we've got that. We were the province the most affected in Canada, especially Montreal. But here, we're the office, personal Cerro de Pasco, we're north of Montreal, 75 kilometers north of Montreal, and this area was not that affected. So we've been back to work here for the past 6 weeks. We're taking measures.
Okay, let's talk a little bit about Cerro de Pasco. What exactly does your company do?
So what we do have the mineral rights on one of the largest stockpile in the world, and we do have the mineral rights on one of the largest tailing in the world. Okay, so the tailing is 71 million tons. The stockpile is 104 million tons. Let's recall that mine has been exploited for more than 400 years. Okay, so the Spanish came up there, they move up to Cerro de Pasco at 4,400 meters, and they saw that big mass of lead, silver, zinc, copper, and gold, and they start to exploit it. And for 400 years, that mine has been running. So,
Wow.
So what we do have, we happen to have that mineral rights on that stockpile and that tailing, which was just aside of Volcan operation, which is the Cerro de Pasco mine. Okay, so a few years ago, the pit was shut down. Okay, so they still have those infrastructure. So they do have, they used to exploit 20,000 tons per day, and they used to process 13,000 tons per day. Okay, so today they still have those 2 flotation plants, and they still have that oxide plant. So they process every day. They process some 7,000 tons in the flotation plants, and they process 2,500 tons in the oxide plant. Okay, so let's recall they have some life, okay, which is kind of short for their sulfide resource. So ideally would be to match all those resources together. So we still have, as I mentioned to you, 71 million tons of sulfide resources, and we in the tailing, and we do have 104 million tons of sulfide in the stockpile. So we could reprocess that over a period of more than 10 years. And if we add to that what's left in the pit, well, it would make a win-win-win situation here. We believe even if they extract mineral for 400 years of that mine, we still believe that there's more resource left in the mine than what was exploited over the past 400 years.
Well, the mining sector has definitely come back, or is coming back. We remember the days of the late 2008s, 2009s, and where the industry was compared to where it is now. Where do you see this? Where do you see the sector, the mining sector, headed? Do you think this run is going to continue?
Well, present me the guy who can predict the price of gold. Please introduce him to me, okay? Over years, okay? So, but I think I think the silver is going to do well, as many experts. Nice thing about Cerro de Pasco, it's the mine with the largest resource of silver in a single site in the world.
I
Okay, so
didn't
we
know
do
that.
have 689 million ounces of silver resource, and we have 1.6 billion ounces of silver equivalent, which, by the way, made 66% of the silver equivalent of Pan American silver.
Wow. I was talking with an analyst a few weeks ago, and they said, as far as what they would put their money in, it would be silver, because they feel that it hasn't made the move quite like gold has, that it's still lagging behind. And so that puts you in a good position, according to that one analyst. And again, for our listeners and our viewers, the opinions expressed are my own and do not necessarily reflect those of the Canadian Securities Exchange. Have you gone to Cerro de Pasco? When's the last time you went to the actual site?
Well, I've gone there many times. Okay, so now we signed a share purchase agreement to buy all assets shares of Volcan in Cerro de Pasco, and obviously we need an important financing. We will need on a first phase like $50 to $60 million US, and we had the interest from few institutions. They had the access to the data room. They did their own due diligence, and just after PDAC, everybody was was willing to go on site. Like we were planned to go, 8 of us, to do a site due diligence, and obviously this was all canceled because of the COVID-19 that came. So we had that extension. We had that extension again up to June 27th, which is tomorrow.
Okay.
Okay. So we're obviously there's nothing to do right now. Like you're going to buy a house, you're going to see it on the paper. It's nice. You will never buy the house without seeing the house. Okay? Right. So we need to access the site, and it will come in a very near future.
Now you
Peru,
just.
Peru, as Chile and Brazil, they have their peak right now. The curve's coming down, so we should have access to the site. In fact, all those mines in Peru have restarted. It's just the borders are still closed. Oh, so we just cannot land in Lima.
Speaking of the financing, you just completed a first tranche, I think, for 1.15 million. I think that was announced a couple days ago. So Congratulations on that. What's it like trying to raise money during this time, no matter how good or hot the news or the commodity is?
So Barrington, obviously there's 2 types of money. Okay, so what we need, it's $50 million to start with. That right. 50 million is almost easier to raise than the small money. Okay, so why did we have to raise that small money? Okay, so we announced a financing of $2 million. It's just because in March we were to take over, and we have to hire that AAA staff. Okay, so engineer, metallurgists, geologists, chemists. Okay. So we had to hire this AAA staff, and most of them were expats. Okay, so they all came to Peru, and suddenly everything was shut down. But now we cannot lay off those people, because at any time we're going to take over that operation. And it took us 2 years to build that AAA staff there. So obviously we have reduced the consultant fees, and just to make sure, depending how long this pandemic is going to last. So we have decided to raise an extra $2 million. So we have announced Friday, 2 weeks ago, that we were going to raise that $2 million. We closed 1.15 within 3 days, and we're going to do the second tranche on Tuesday there.
Well, that's good that it was able to close that quickly, and I think that's an indicator of the belief in your story, as well as in the commodity.
There is abundant money for good project, by the way. There's always good money for good project.
And I think that's really important for the investors and for the, the retail traders in the audience who's listening and watching the show to know when you have a good story, people will follow.
It's easy with Cerro de Pasco. It was the largest mine in the world. Like in 1912, they list Cerro de Pasco Copper Corporation at the New York Stock Exchange. And it was the largest copper mine in the world. It was a copper, silver, gold mine at the time. And they extract some 20,000 tons per day for 40 years.
I love hearing the history. I love hearing the history about this stuff.
50 years ago, like they were grinding, but we see in the tailings, like we've got the coarse grain, like it's 80 microns. So imagine if you grind that to 10 microns, all the gold, all the silver, and all the copper left in those tailings.
Well, so can you give our audience a definition of what a tailing is?
Well, tailing is the material that has been processed, okay? So sometimes, depending how much retention time and you understand how much you grind, the recovery will be so, okay? And then you send that into a tailing. It's a pound that is appropriate to receive that material. That's tailing. It's material that has been processed, but rarely you're going to get more than 85 or 90% of the metal that was contained in the ore, okay? So that's a tailing. So at that time, they probably have recovered 50% of the gold, 50% of the copper, okay?
Right.
So a stockpile is a material that has not been processed. In our case, okay, the mine was so rich, okay, so what they were doing, the stockpile generally it's waste, okay, but in Cerro de Pasco case, the mine was so rich, so what they were doing, they were extracting some 20,000 tons per day, and they were processing 13,000 tons per day, and they were stockpiling 7,000 tons per day. So the next day, it was a lot more painful to go back in the pit than reprocess those 7,000 tons, okay? So they have accumulate and accumulate. So that's why we end up with 104 million ton stockpile, of which some 50 million ton are economic. The nice thing about the tailing and a stockpile, there's no mining costs. The mining costs and the mining operation are so important. There are no mining costs. You take that material, you regrind it, and you reprocess it. In our case, you do have those infrastructure. By the way, there's more than $700 million worth of infrastructure on site. This is what we're acquiring.
Wow.
Total, we'll end up with $26 billion worth of metals. Most of it above ground.
Oh, that is truly a good story, and something that we love to highlight on Mining Monday. Now let's back up a little bit. How did you get involved, not only with the company but also in capital markets?
So, I'm a geological engineer, okay? And back in 1996, we list a company. I decided to go as a promoter. And I'm telling you, at that time, I didn't know the difference between a bid and an ask. I learned it rapidly, okay? So following that, I've listed 9 companies on the Canadian and European exchange, okay? And my last one was Maya Gold and Silver project in Morocco that turned out to be a company. We start with a 2 million market cap, which is today a 150 million market cap. And one of my shareholders was Steven Zadka, okay, investor banker from New York. And he was the architect of that project, Cerro de Pasco. And he wanted me to merge Cerro de Pasco private with Maya. And I just realized the mix was no good. So when I end up my job with Maya, which is March 17, well, I thought about it, and I decided to go with Stephen, and we took another company I was involved in, and we merged that company with Cerro de Pasco Private. That's how I got involved.
Okay. And what's your experience been like on and with the Canadian Securities Exchange?
Can you repeat the question? What's my experience?
What's your experience? How have you found being listed on the Canadian Securities Exchange?
Well, that's a good. I'll tell you frankly, when things are going well, it's the best life of them all. When the market is not there, it's tougher life. But historically, running out of money in the company, I mentioned to you, I've listed 9 of them, and we ran out of money many times. The key being listed on a Canadian exchange is running out of money. It's not a problem. Running out of ideas, there's a big problem here.
I'm going to put that on a T-shirt. I truer words never spoken. It's not about the money. It's about the idea.
But with regards to Cerro de Pasco, what an easy one. It's a very ambitious project because there's so many parts in the puzzle, and we've been together like 3-4 years putting all that together, and even some investor found it at the beginning, like you're not going to make it. There's too many parts in that puzzle, and suddenly now we're getting there. We're really getting there. It's too bad that we have to have that challenge with COVID-19, because the last portion was the money, and we have those investors almost committed there, and we just could not. There's always an excuse, but this is a real excuse. It's COVID-19. There's nothing we can do about it.
Right. No, it's definitely affected. Well, it's affected the entire world, and hopefully we can get past that. What's 2 questions? What is your differentiator between other projects and Cerro de Pasco? What is that highlight? That's the first question. And the second question, you know what? I'm just going to stick with the first question for now. What differentiates you from other companies?
So Cerro de Pasco, by the way, we're not calling it a mining project. Okay, it's a remediation project. So okay. In Cerro de Pasco, you've got that there's a lot of sulfide. Like those people are seated, 67,000 people are seated on a natural geological accident, which is today called a mine. I told you it's a big mass of lead, zinc, copper, gold, and silver. So they came long time ago, 400 years ago, and as most of the mine, it was an underground mine to start with. So they put the first house right beside the shaft, and they put the kitchen there, and they put the director house there, and then the city start to expand, and suddenly they just realize they're seated on that mine. Okay, so now the mine has to be push and push and push. And there's all those like there's sulfides all over the place. It's naturally contaminated. That's why those people are there, because of the mining activity. Okay. So what's nice about that project is the city is presently in that situation, which is such a situation. So the only thing we can do here is remediate all those tailings and all those stockpile on a period of 18 years. In addition to that, okay, let's recall there were 7,000 people working in that mine, I would say 10 years ago, okay? Today, the mine barely employs 700 people. There's 67,000 people living there. It's the only activity of the city, okay? So there's this problem of natural contamination, but there's also a problem of poverty. So what Cerro de Pasco's we're coming there. We're going to do number one, winning situation by cleaning up this area, reprocessing all that material. Okay, we're coming there, creating job, bringing back the wealth in the community, and finally we're coming back there, and we're going to bring, I think, some good result for our shareholders.
Wow, that's when you're able to help the community that you're working in and that you're invested in, that goes beyond the dollars. So so thank you for doing that. Thinking
What Barrington, what a win situation here.
Yeah, no, I totally agree with that. Any last points you want to say to potential investors, people looking to learn more about the Cerro de Pasco story and things that perhaps they have to look forward to in the future?
Well, maybe you go to our website, you check the progress we have made over the past, well, since we're listed there. We had a market cap of $600,000 when we, just before we got listed there. And when we merged with Cerro de Pasco, and our market cap is right now $80 million, okay? And we are to sign the final agreement with Volcan, and we're taking over. Like we're suddenly a big company. We're suddenly a big company. We're starting like with no exploration. The minerals is there, most of it above the ground. And what's nice about Cerro de Pasco, in addition, is nobody has put more. Historically, nobody has put more than $1 million in exploration in the area. And we do have 11,000 hectares of ground. Could you imagine that? It's probably one of the most attractive geological area in the world. You go from Cerro de Pasco to Lima, you got 7 world-class deposits, including Cerro de Pasco, which is probably still one of the top 10 world-class deposit.
Wow. Well, thank you, Mr. Goulet, for taking the time not only to educate our audience, but to also share your experience and your insights. This has been your host, Barrington Miller, an edition of Mining Monday with Cerro de Pasco. Thank you for listening.
Thank you.